There's nothing wrong with low contract values like 10, 20,000, which I agree are small contracts, provided you have a low touch approach to distribution. So you do not have to sell directly. Our general rule of thumb, but don't ask me to justify this, is just the rule of thumb, is that you need to be able to show ACVs of above $100,000 a year in order to justify direct sales efforts.
Hi, this is Tomasz Świeboda. I'm a partner at Inovo Venture Partners. It's an early stage venture fund focused on Poland and the region. The idea of this podcast is to give value to founders in Poland and Central Europe. I'm here today with Dan Lupu, who is a partner at Earlybird. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Tomasz. Thanks for the invite.
Great to have you. I've heard so many great things about you as investor, so I'm really happy we have you. And we can
not to disappoint.
Dan, can you tell me a bit more about yourself and your fund and what investment are you searching for?
As you said, I'm a partner in what we call the Digital East Fund that runs under the Earlybird umbrella. I'm Romanian, based in Bucharest nominally, but I travel quite a bit throughout the region. I studied computer science in high school and university, but switched to finance immediately, so never got to work as a programmer in my life. And I started on the investment side immediately after university, went through equity research, private equity, then switched back to technology with Intel Capital, and joined Earlybird in 2012. We started investing in the region in 2014. Our first fund, which raised $150 million in capital. Out of that fund, we made 15 investments, out of which 6 in CEE. I was in charge of all the CEE investments in the first fund. Mm-hmm. In June last year, we launched our second fund, which is pretty much the same. We like the formula. We were fairly successful with it. So pretty much the same fund size, same team, same geography, same strategy. We are generally technology investors. We invest in technology and technology-enabled services, such as e-commerce or recruiting. But we do focus mostly, especially in the region, on B2B software and deep technology.
And B2B, you prefer B2B enterprise or B2B small business?
B2B enterprise, the problem with B2B small business is that it's always challenging to find a scalable and efficient distribution model.
Okay.
But I'm open to look at things that target SMEs as well.
Okay. And when you say Central Europe, which countries do you mean? Like, where did you do deals or where do you search for deals?
We invest everywhere east of Germany and Austria, north to south from Poland to Greece. And eastwards, including Belarus, Ukraine, and Turkey. We don't invest in Russia, and our sister fund invests in Western Europe.
Can you describe a kind of sweet spot deal? Let's start with size, but also characteristic, like stage-wise, where should it be, and how much is your sweet spot deal ticket?
Sure. So we have the flexibility of investing across different stages, so we can start at seed and do all the way to growth. In practice, in the first fund, we invested from 400K to 7.5 million first tickets. This is only the first tickets because our strategy is to invest across multiple stages. And we are capable to continue to invest, and we can even lead rounds later on. For example, in the case of UiPath, we invested in each round all the way to the round that valued the company at 1 billion.
That's very general. I'm also a generalist fund, but every investor has something that he or she particularly like. Like if I see a deal in Poland with very good founders and I think of, okay, I need to find an international global partner for it. In what kind of deals should I call you?
Most probably our sweet spot is pre-Series A or Series A, where we lead or co-lead and invest anywhere from 3 to 5 million initial tickets for maybe a 15 to 20% stake initially. One thing to understand, which I think it's relevant, is that we are somehow limited by the size of our fund in that we invest in companies where we see a potential for exit of a minimum 500 million euros.
Okay, so that's what you are searching for, like exit for 500 million.
Yes, exactly. That's a minimum size. And this is not to say that businesses that are not targeting this kind of exit size are not good. We are not making a judgment call. It's just that the math for us only works in this way.
Yeah, that's the VC math. I understand, coming also from the size of the fund.
Yes, exactly.
To be able to raise 3 to 5 million ticket in a pre-Series A or a Series A round, what the company should have, like what should be the characteristics in terms of, I would assume they should have some kind of product market fit. Yeah. And then the question is, how do you define? Should they have like one or a couple of large clients? Do they have to have, sales force? Like what's the straight of this company?
For example, we are now in discussions with a company that has a product that is fairly technical, so deep tech. And here we are looking for initial customer adoption that can be either in the form of a large following if you have an open source model, or a couple of high conviction large clients that are using the technology in a live situation. We can do and we can evaluate projects where you have a couple or a few clients that are in POC stage, but we do need to see the customer adoption and customer engagement with the product or the technology.
Would you say that it has to be clear that the product brings value to customers and that it is scalable?
We do make our judgment calls. With deep tech, you need to understand the space and you need to understand how this is different than what's existing on the market and what's going to be the impact. Having a product market fit, it's important, but I think that we cannot really ask companies to provide a lot of validation through significant number of live clients. But people that are done with the POC, that are ready to commit, and we can talk to them and understand what's their use case, how is their evaluation process, and plans going forward are important validators. Because one thing that I learned very early in my investment career is that it's important to get third-party validation. I've seen maybe hundreds of ideas that I thought are incredibly obvious that didn't go anywhere for different reasons. That's why I'm trying to use my judgment initially, but then try to find independent validation for my assumptions.
You mentioned 500 million exit. What does the company have? Like how big has to be the market? And how do you assess whether... And if you could think of some of the investments you recently made, like how did you assess the potential, whether it has this 500 million or not? Or how a founder should think about it? Yeah.
First of all, this also translates into our focus on in B2B. Because first of all, this kind of size usually comes from addressing a global market or a wide regional geography. And this also brings us back to our focus on B2B, because we found out that B2C from the region are not very well suited to scale up and get out of the region in order to get to this kind of scale. Maybe Poland has a couple of examples that run contrary to this argument. But as a general rule, we think it's B2B software is more suited to address global markets than B2C businesses.
When we assess companies, we sometimes see B2B companies with, let's say, ACV of, so average contract value of, let's say, $10,000, $20,000, which is, in my opinion, for B2B very low. So
yes, I agree.
How do you see this? Like, how do you recognize, because today the big corporations like any, like GE, whatever big American corporation you take, they like to implement innovations. So what I've seen in the B2B enterprise sometimes is that, you are able to sell to big corporations because they like innovation, but that's not a real value for them. How do you find the real ones which have a product which is really crucial for the big corporations?
So you touch on an interesting topic here, which is ACV. And I think there's nothing wrong with low contract values like 10, 20,000, which I agree are small contracts. provided you have a low touch approach to distribution. So you do not have to sell directly. Our general rule of thumb, but don't ask me to justify this, is just the rule of thumb, is that you need to be able to show ACVs of above $100,000 a year in order to justify direct sales efforts. If you are able to scale online, low-touch SaaS type of distribution model and charge 10, 20,000 per year, and you have a universe of few thousands or tens of thousands of potential clients, this can be a good, sizable business. But if you are talking about a universe of customers that runs into the hundreds of or thousands, you need much larger ACVs. A caveat to that, and I have a good example in one of our more recent investments with FinTech OS, is an approach where you try to sidestep the problem of going through a lengthy sales process where for large contracts, so for contracts above 100,000, you usually deal with corporates, and the sales process is quite convoluted, takes a lot of time. So a lot of time, a lot of uncertainty, high cost associated with that. But I've seen, and I think I've seen a couple of other examples where people start small and then they try to scale up and basically creep themselves in with the customers. The advantage being that usually smaller initial contract values can be approved at the department level, or even a manager could have a budget to pay $3,000-$4,000 a month initially. And then if you are successful and you have a clear strategy about how you manage clients and how you add to what you already delivered, it could be an interesting scalable way to address this conundrum.
For a founder from Poland, what would you say, what's the best way to approach you?
I'm always available either on LinkedIn or on email. My email address is lupu@earlybird.com. Happy to talk to people, have a look at information and provide quick feedback. I think this is what we promise to people in general, that we are not going to get them bogged down in endless requests for information. And we are generally able to give quick yes or no answers and make it efficient for both parties.
How does the process look like? Let's say I'm a founder, I send you the teaser, I met with you or one of your colleagues, and the idea looks interesting for you. How does the process look like, and how long can I expect it will take?
First of all, I'm happy to talk to people and meet as many people as possible. It doesn't have to be very formal. We set up calls, which in these days are the only way to get to know each other. Don't need to limit yourself to a specific stage. I'm happy to talk to people early on. If this is too early for us, I'm happy to say it's too early and get back in touch at a later stage. As an example, we invested in Photoneo. We led their Series A. This is a company in Slovakia. We knew of them, and we were initially reviewing information about the company back when they raised their seed round. I thought it's too early. I thought it's too risky for us, but we kept in touch, and then we led their Series A. So this was 2 or 3 years later.
Maybe a side question, but how big is your team, like the East Europe team?
So we are now 3 partners running the fund. We have 3 other full-time investment professionals, but we also have people that join us for internships and are with us. So our team grows and shrinks depending on the time of year. We are 6 people in the investment team.
So Inovo is actually exactly the same. Don't you have the problem that there are so many companies that it's impossible to meet, let's say, all of them? Yeah,
it is impossible. There's obviously a lot of scanning and a lot of judgment calls being made early on. But with those that catch our eye, we are happy to engage fairly early on and talk to them and schedule calls, schedule meetings whenever we travel there.
Okay. It's clear for me what kind of things, people are you looking for. Can you comment when you're engaged in a company? And it's with regards to you, but also any other investors. Like, first question would be, how do you help? How do you support companies? And second, similar would be, how in general investors can help companies, and how founders can distinguish the good investors from the bad ones.
I think it has a lot to do with what the company needs. It has to do with how many people they have in the founding team, how many founders, how many executives, what's their profile, how well-rounded the team is. Are they all engineers? Are there people that are interested in the commercial side? Are they people that want to do sales and marketing? These are important questions. As a general statement, we are not operators. So we do not get involved operationally, and we do not aim to control what's going on. I think this is one of the criteria that we evaluate as part of our investment process, how well the company functions, but also how open are they to discussions, to coaching, to be able to absorb input that we could provide. And from there, we are happy to do a lot of different roles, from providing capital, which is obvious, to helping them relocate to new countries in terms of their jurisdiction. We had most of our investments relocate from CE to either Western Europe, Netherlands or Luxembourg or US for their corporate structures. We have done this multiple times. Longer term, we have the ability to bring co-investors, which means that we can introduce the next investor to lead the following round, to bring people from different geographies. We do have the visibility that allows us to work with a number of leading funds in the world. And if you look at our portfolio, you'll see that almost all the big names co-invested with us at some point. But we can also get involved more, for example, in recruiting by either validating candidates or helping you to run the process. We have a dedicated resource within our team that is only targeted to help companies in our portfolio recruit better. And her role is, again, flexible, from identifying internal HR managers to finding senior candidates, screening them, and creating shortlists.
That's interesting. We are thinking of the same, although our fund is a bit like, we have a 40 million fund, so it's a bit too small to afford such a person today. Because it's usually like this, yeah. After the investment, the companies, they grow in terms of people. So this person works with the founders, and also, like, does this person gets more operational, like, organize the process, or it's more on the coaching?
No. It gets it gets all the way down to screening candidates and identifying potential candidates, contacting them, cold calling them, headhunting.
Okay, that's super good.
Think of it as a retained recruiter, which is part of our team that is happy to work with companies in our portfolio.
But it works with the companies and search for people who like fit the culture, I would assume, because every company is a bit different and you need different kind of.
Yeah, I think the culture fit falls to the team. It's not an independent process that is run by us. We don't make decisions. We just help the team.
And if you think of the last 2 years of your work, what do you think, like, the founders where you are an investor, what would they say about the last 2 years? Where Dan Lupu helped us the most? Like, what was his biggest value added?
It differs for each team. I mean, it can be as trivial as being able to vouch for the company to a new corporate client. Early on, there are instances in which some of our portfolio companies were trying to deliver processes or get selected by large and very large corporations. And the concerns of these people were, okay, this is a small company out of Romania, out of Bulgaria, out of Slovakia, out of wherever, and they want to deliver a project in UK or US. They don't have anybody here. How do I know that this is a company that will survive until next year or 6 months from now? Can I make a decision to adopt their technology before knowing that they are a serious corporation? This is not trivial. This is a very important point that these guys are usually making. So it's important for us to make the point, get on a call with them, explain how our portfolio shaped up, that we have companies that are valued into the billions of dollars, that already scaled to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, that we have 150 million plus capital available, that we are the largest fund in the region, that we create a consortium to co-invest. So we have access to capital, we have access to expertise, and this means that the company is, they can trust the company and not be concerned about their survival. So this might seem trivial, but it's an important decision-making point for potential clients.
So you can even support in the international clients, not in the region, but like the global ones.
Yes, sure. I mean, we have contacts through our existing portfolio companies, through prior portfolio companies with a lot of different corporations. We are happy to talk to these guys and try to find a connection that would help advance our new portfolio company.
Okay. You meet lots of founders and you invested in many founders. Is there something you see a challenge founders, maybe especially from Poland, but also from the countries in the region? Like, what's the biggest challenge they face or the thing they should change or improve? And what would be your advice to founders in the region?
That's a good idea. I think it's important to understand where you want to get with your company. There's a lot of people that are getting seduced by this model of VC-funded company and having multiple rounds of financing and dream of an IPO or a large M&A exit. But this doesn't have to be like this. There's nothing wrong in trying to build a company that doesn't scale to a VC size. We are looking for companies that scale at least to a €500 million valuation on exit. That's the minimum that would make the math work on our side. But there's nothing wrong in building a company that ends up being worth 5 to 10 million. It's most probably business that is profitable. It's a business that you can run with much less risk, with much less headache than trying to get through multiple funding rounds, get to international markets, try to expand globally and so on. Nothing wrong with that. It's not for us. I think founders need to be honest with themselves about what they want to achieve. There's no correct answer, but you need to do it. You need to go through this introspection process and come up with something clear. Countries like Poland are at a slight disadvantage because in many cases the market, the local market is big enough to create a lifestyle business where you get to a decent size in order to make it worth your while as an entrepreneur. But this makes it less interesting for investors like us.
We also have a lot of discussions about, we call it bootstrapping versus the VC. And I also think that bootstrapping is, very good and very okay for many founders and many, I think also the industry a bit decides whether it should be, bootstrapping or a VC case or whether it's I also partly think that also the market, by the fact whether it's a winner takes it all or not, strongly decides whether it should be a VC case or not.
There are businesses in which you don't have the option of creating a stable 5-10 million euro company. There you are either $1 billion company or you are nothing. So that's true. But for the majority of businesses, it's not the case.
If you invest into a company, how much do you think about the next round? Like, is it necessary to have a next round if Earlybird invests, or it's possible that you get to this 500 million without any extra funding?
A lot of people are either trying to coax us or to incentivize us saying, look, this is the last funding round that I'll have. For companies that develop globally, this usually is not the case. And that's just the reality. It's not that we prefer to have it one way or the other. We think that companies have the opportunity to deploy capital if they have a good business model, and they need to reflect that in their expectations. We try to understand from the very beginning how much capital the company might need. We might be wildly wrong about it, but we try to go through this planning exercise because to a certain extent, this has an impact on how we value the company initially. And we try to make sure that we reflect the future capital needs in the composition of the cap table, making sure that the teams stay incentivized until the end.
We already passed 30 minutes, so that will be last or one of the last questions. But we are now in the COVID situation. Can you comment how did it influence your business, and especially, how your criteria change or whether they change? What kind of deals are you searching today? I mean, in May, June?
I don't think it changed yet. I think digitization, digital transformation, automation are things that are still valid. And regardless of the impact of the pandemic on the markets will still be sizable. Travel market is down 90%, but even if it comes back to 50% what it was before, it's still a massive market, right? So a company that starts requires a 5 million investment means that they have a negligible market share. They cannot talk about market share in such an industry. So their opportunity to grow is still significant. So this kind of impact of the pandemic does not limit yet the opportunity for growth for companies at the stage where we invest.
Any final remark or final thought you would like to share?
We are big believers in the overall growth of the region. I think there is significant talent, and I think the quality of the businesses that are coming up for funding is improving. I think people understand now that you can create $1 billion company out of Poland, out of Romania. And I think global investors are recognizing this and are much more open to work with funds like us to help identify local investment targets.
Dan, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time. It was a very, very interesting discussion.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to stay in touch. Happy to get in touch with founders and provide quick feedback.
Super cool. I hope you have some leads from here and it ends up in a deal we do together.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks so much.